Hey y'all, today we have a repeat guest, but it's been a while because we usually bring him on to talk about some basketball, which is, for the first time this season, we're talking some basketball. Of course, somehow the Eagles or the Phillies in some kind of weird way are going to make it into the conversation. But of course, it's Austin Krell from the Painted Lines, credential reporter and all that. I see him all the time talking to the guys, and you've seen him, of course, on Twitter if you care at all about Sixers and the beard and Embiid and all that. But Austin, tell the people a little bit about yourself if I misstated anything.
No, you got it all right. I cover the Sixers for the Painted Lines. I'm on the beat. I cover the NBA at large for the USA Today, and that's pretty much what I do.
So, starting off, obviously our most favorite player, Ben Simmons, is starting off. He's at least playing this season. He's playing basketball. What are your thoughts preliminarily? We're pretty into this young season here, but what are your takeaways from what you're seeing out of Brooklyn?
To be honest, and I know this isn't going to be the rah-rah that Sixers fans want to hear. I do it to an extent, like at a human level, feel kind of for him. Because this is, I'm sure it's not easy to try and you're trying to figure out how this all works. And, I think as viewers of the NBA or viewers of sports in general, it's very easy for us to sit here and say he should be playing like this. Why can't he do that? How come he can't score 20 points right now? When you're an athlete, it's not always as simple as I can or I cannot do this.
Right.
There's a dynamic to how a team functions, and he's trying to figure things out. Obviously, it's quite clear to me that he's trying to do a lot of things at once, and that's why he's fouling out of games. And the offense has looked pretty terrible. I looked at the numbers last night. It actually, I think the popular storyline is to say like, oh, he was terrible, and like the Sixers offense was hard to watch at times with him on the floor. The Nets offense is struggling when he's on the floor. Shocker. It's all Ben Simmons. Well, actually, they are still getting outscored by like 14 points per 100 possessions when Kyrie and Durant are on the floor without him. So it isn't just about Ben Simmons. Like that's maybe a part of the formula that's creating problems right now, but you're not hitting on all of the issues when you think about what's going on with the Nets, why they're 1-2. It isn't all him. That's only part of it. But it is funny to see in some respects the Nets fans be like, well, this offense isn't going to work. Like this is ridiculous. But what is happening here? And we're like, no, this is the guy that you hyped up all off, and you bought the workout videos, and you said that Harden's this and that, and turns out that the Sixers very clearly were the victors in that trade. And not only that, but they didn't have to go Tyrese Maxey either.
That's right.
Is a dagger, if you ask me.
Well, I mean, and I think that the Nets lost the trade, but I don't think that they got fleeced. If Ben Simmons is playing, they didn't get fleeced. It's just that, seriously, how much do you really want Ben Simmons to have the ball in his hands? I mean, obviously you would want him as a distributor, but you've got Kyrie Irving, who essentially wants to play the one of sorts. And so when he's not a threat in the way that we know as a basketball player he is, your expectations for him in Brooklyn have to be different than what he would have ascended to being in Philly, being, number one or number two. He's really not even to be rude or anything, but he's not even their number three, and he shouldn't be offensive option.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that he isn't trying to be he's not trying to be an option on offense. He's more trying to be like the connective tissue. Like I watched a little bit here and there of them so far, and he's not even looking at the basket right now. And it was like that was bad at times in Philly. It's much more pronounced in Brooklyn. And he's basically saying like, here I am. I'm bringing the ball up. Come get it from me. And here like I'm literally waiting for you to come get the ball and do whatever. So at this juncture in their season, Ben Simmons is not comfortable trying to enact pressure on the rim, and that's kind of what he's going to have to do if he's going to be an effective basketball player without taking jump shots.
So in Philly, the Sixers haven't started off too hot either. They started off 1-3, but James Harden has been hot. I mean, do you think that this is at all sustainable at this point in James Harden's career, or is this just like a pretty nice start?
So I don't know that it's sustainable because I just think it's a lot of it is his physical feeling of how his legs feel, and I think that the one thing right now that's really helping him get off to this hot start is the mid-range game. He took 61 mid-range or 67-ish mid-range jumpers or mid-range shots period last season with the Sixers in 21 games. He's taken 30 thus far. So that's only 4 games. He's basically halved that size last year. He's
Wow.
really much more comfortable in mid range, and that's paid dividends thus far. He's averaging 20 something points, 26 points per game, I think, and he's used that as a tool. And it isn't something like where he's trying to force it. It's more so like, hey, if they're going to give me this pocket of space at around the floor, I'm just going to step in there and get mid range jumpers. And he's even using some of the same moves that he used traditionally at
Yep.
2-point line. So it's kind of like he's saying, what if I just did the same things but 5 or 6 steps closer to the basket? And it's working right now. I think the most impressive thing is the playmaking. He's averaging I think almost
9 assists. Yeah.
yeah. Well, not only that, but it's the assist to turnover ratio for me that really matters. His ratio is almost like 5-1 for a guard. You want that to be 2.5-1. So I mean, that's really, really, really good. He's been incredibly efficient, not just shooting the ball, but as a playmaking lead guard, he's taken care of the ball tremendously. If anyone on the team can make shots right now, that would help a lot.
So Embiid, watching especially online, people are saying that he's not playing as well. I mean, he's only averaging 27 points, so he's not having as hot a start. Would you say that that is noticeable, up close and personal, that he's not, asserting himself as much this season, or is that kind of just fodder and people looking at the numbers?
So I think people are like really hard on Joel, and it's like harder than they are on most athletes. There's not a lot of room for Joel to like have bad games before the criticism starts. In my opinion, I think right now he's put up back-to-back games of 25 plus points. I think it is, which is for most players it's very good. Um, for him, it's just the efficiency. Like it was running into a lot of the same mistakes that he made when he was younger, with the falling for the double teams and
Yep.
not getting rid of the ball fast enough.
Yep.
I think the one thing that's kind of alarming early on, more than anything, is this his shooting around the rim has suffered. He has missed a lot of layups. Uh, the Spurs game comes to mind where he was pretty terrible. Or no, he was actually very good in the Spurs game. My apologies. But as a team, they struggled around the rim. But you look at the Milwaukee game where he was really, really bad in the second half. The Boston game, he had an abominable third quarter where he was, he took 5 turnovers, whatever it was for the game, I think. And I think he's traditionally a slow starter. That's kind of the way that he comes around. I do think the plantar fasciitis thing is real, because before this season, after like the 4th preseason game, he said he had an on and off summer. And I think he kind of tongue in cheek said during media day that he didn't do anything and he kind of sat on the couch. And I think it was like he was kind of joking, but he was also being serious. Like he
Yep.
had he had a foot issue.
Yep.
You're grateful that it wasn't a broken foot. It's plantar fasciitis, which is, for those who don't know, it's in the heel. And I can't say that I'm a 7 foot you know, 260-pound guy or whatever he is,
Mhm.
but I am 5'11", 6 foot, and I've had that, and it's a very painful thing. It's a condition, and if you're running and you're applying pressure on that and putting weight on that, it can really, really hurt until you get it figured out. So I can understand where he's coming from, where he wasn't able to do much while it was in its most painful form. And I think now he's trying to get his wind back under him and get back into his peak physical shape. Um, so it takes some time, but I think he's starting to kind of take form. The one thing that I think is valid concern and is valid frustration is effort level for the first couple games was not where it needs to be.
Yep.
Um, and I think there were times when he wasn't getting back on defense or on offense. He was making just gesticulating with his arms at referees when there wasn't a call there. Um, he was just kind of slowly jogging back, and there were times where they're like, the offense is down the other end in transition. They're waiting for him to come set a pick so they can go, and he's not there. He's 5 steps behind, and you're like, that's unacceptable. You need to get down the court so that your team can go and run the offense. Um, and so, that was an issue. But over the last 2 games, he's looked a lot more like himself. He's definitely been more aggressive around the inside. Um, and, I think it's just now you got to find the right pattern of playing time for him to, be in the game, be effective, but also not tire himself out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can just see he's one of those guys where you can just see it in his body, how hard he was able to push himself over the summer. And so he doesn't look yet that he's back at top peak physical form. And to your point about, if you can't train if you're trying to recover. So he's still recovering, and then hopefully around mid-season we won't be losing to the teams like the Spurs, which they just lost to.
Yeah.
I mean,
By the way, the
Am
Spurs are
I
pretty
am I
fun.
disrespecting the Spurs? Are the Spurs actually going to be good this year, Austin?
So I don't know. Like, they looked kind of like the blueprint of what the Celtics are. The other night, like two wings that can, make that are can put the ball on the floor, that are long and rangy and can shoot the ball. It kind of looked like you were watching some, baby form of the Celtics. And they won again. They're 3-1. So maybe there was maybe there was a market correction where people kind of thought they were going to be awful, and they're kind of like, well, actually, we're a little more talented than that. But the other side of it, the Sixers flat out did not get back in transition in that game, and the team as a whole, they missed. I think they only shot about 55% at the rim in that game, and I think they shot 4 for 14, between 4 and 14 feet from the basket. So they didn't capitalize on the most efficient shots. So you take that as an outlier, and they're probably winning that game. It was a weird night for sure.
So the of course, you got the very reasonable Philadelphia fan base who's of course always calling for somebody's job. If you have a bad 6-game stretch in any sport, baseball, football, basketball, they're calling for your job. But people have been talking about getting rid of Doc for some time, and of course now you got the Phils and the Super Bowl having Ken their coach. Do you think that is all in consideration for this year? Or you think Doc is good, and the fan base really needs to just cool out and let things play out?
So I think fan bases in general do this thing where if they feel like there's another level the team can reach, they innately blame the coach because that's the easiest band-aid solution. You can get rid of a coach, a new coach gets in there, and suddenly it's all peaceful and great, and and the energy is back. At some point, these guys are making $10+ million, a lot of them,
Yep.
uh, to play a sport. They have to be professionals and give their max effort. You can't just put that on a coach. Like, the coach can only do so much. The players got to do what they got to do. Having said that, um, I think the Doc has been okay thus far. He's definitely been pretty strict with Montrezl Harrell in terms of, like not just giving him the backup center spot. Like he's pulled him pretty quickly. He's been willing to go with small ball. He's been willing to go with Paul Reed. It feels like Montrez hasn't done enough. That's more than I can say that, than players in the past that they've had that he has played. I think the one thing thus far that has been a little bit like jarring is the fact that Tyrese Maxey has kind of been reduced to this catch and shoot 3-point
Yep,
guy instead of like using his best weapons, which is getting downhill and getting to the rim.
that's right.
And but I also think like his teammates have to do a better job of saying, let's call this play up for Tyrese, get him going, set a pick for him and let him just get downhill and see if we can maybe create an open shot somewhere else if Harden can't get this look to go. Or if, hey, this team is switching, let's try to get Maxey isolated against their flat-footed big man and let him go to work so that way he can go right around the guy and get to the basket. Those are things that the team has to also do on the court themselves. But their offense against the Spurs and against the Milwaukee at times didn't make sense. Harden brought the Sixers all the way back from a 13 down that fourth quarter, whatever it was, and one of the last possessions of the game was Joel taking an isolated elbow jumper after he shot 6-21. So that didn't make much sense. There are certainly gripes. I think that Doc's in a position where he can't win. So he might as well just do his job to the best that he thinks he's doing. And, live with the results. If they win games, great for him. And if they don't, then he'll be out. It'll be someone else's problem. I do get the sense at the moment that there's a lot of internal support for Doc. I think there's this whole perception that Darrow was hired after Doc came so that he can't possibly like Doc. I think that there's a lot of internal support for Doc at the moment. And, if they continue to struggle and they're underperforming expectations, then obviously the coach is the first thing that you look at. But at the moment, I think they're maybe I don't know that they're like obviously no one's happy with 1-3, right? But I think at the moment Doc is not sitting with a lighter under his butt.
Yeah, I mean, what is the expectation though? If what is this team underperforming look like in terms of the playoff picture?
Right. So I mean, I think the playoff picture is clear. They should be anywhere from the 1 seed to the 3 seed. If they don't get that, and it's health isn't a factor in there, then I think that would be underperforming. And if they still get stuck in the second round, that would be underperforming. And I think that Joel, whether he says publicly or not that he doesn't want any part in those decisions, they're going to look to him and say, like, what do you think? Do you think that he's getting the most out of you? Is he getting the most out of this team? This is Joel's team. So they're going to obviously look to one of their biggest stakeholders in the team to help make that decision. And if also the actual owners, Joshua Harris and now, David Adelman and other owners, if they've had enough, then that'll factor in. But I think right now, like the only ones that are really holding Doc to the fire, it seems like to me at least, are the fans.
Well, they're just the precedent's out there, so he has to deal with that. Now,
Yeah.
Rob Thompson has only got his team to the championship, which is far further than the Sixers have been in 20 years, 21 years now. And so that's that extra pressure. I mean, even the 6-0 Eagles are now dealing with some pressure because of what the Phillies are doing. So it plays into the conversation.
Sure.
So let's pick some of these games that are coming up this week. Of course, if you're listening to the show later in the week, you'll be like, oh, okay. So you'll be more so, seeing if Austin knows his basketball, which of course he does. So Nets are playing the Bucks on Wednesday night. Who you got there?
The Bucks. I tend to give the team that has the most cohesion together the favorite. So I will definitely give it to the Bucks.
The Heat play the Warriors this Thursday. It's in San Fran, if I have that correct. What about that one?
So the Heat Warriors is an interesting one because the Heat have been awful to start this year. Like it's
Yeah.
been really bad, and I'm starting to wonder like, hey, is Kyle Lowry just not coming back? Like was that like was last season's downfall just a sign of
It kind of looked like it, didn't it?
yeah, like he hasn't been very good to start. I would definitely lean Warriors in that one, but it also wouldn't shock me if like the Heat make some sort of panic trade in the near future because they don't want to lose a season of Jimmy for nothing. Because right now they just don't have the pieces, and they have Jay Crowder sitting on the wings in Phoenix, and that's an obvious fit.
They're always just one of those teams that's just well built, and so they'll never the Heat are just never going to stink. As long as they have, unless if we're talking they trade Bam, they trade Jimmy, then yeah, but they're always worth watching. I would say if you're into basketball.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to one of my fellow writer friends about this. We talk about like them losing like PJ Tucker
Yep.
because it's obvious because the Sixers got Tucker, and so that's an obvious connection you make. I feel like we don't make a big enough deal of the fact that they traded Precious Achua to get Kyle Lowry, and Lowry has not worked out thus
No.
far. And if you had and if you had lost Tucker, you could have just slid Achua right into that Tucker spot in the starting
Yeah.
lineup, and that would have been like their next pivot. And I just feel like that was a pretty huge loss given how Lowry's played out thus far.
Yeah, Lowry, another guy that just kind of looks cooked. I mean, as far
Yeah.
as his body language when he's on the court, you even saw it in the playoffs. I mean, the thing about these, like in any sport, football, basketball, baseball, tennis, hockey, whatever, is like great players can always pull it out for a few plays or for a game or two. But over the course of it, he really started looking tired, like late in games and in the playoffs last year. So yeah. Yeah. Mr. Lowry, I don't know. I mean, Philly guy, by the way,
Yeah.
respect, honorable mention, but it's he wasn't looking like Kyle Lowry from when I was in college. That guy, Kyle Lowry, was a bad guy.
Yeah. Well, I think the way he plays, like he's pounding the ball into the ground and he's trying, he's fighting at the rim for, with anybody who dare contest him. And that translates different at 36, 37 than a guy like Chris Paul who keeps the ball on the string and kind of can maneuver in and out of traffic and get to an elbow and knock down a jumper. Doesn't
That's
have
right.
to get to the rim with such force. So I think, like once you have one leg injury, minor or not, when you play the way that Kyle does, you're kind of like, you wonder, do I have a shorter shelf life once I have that one injury?
There are moments. Great example. You watch Chris Paul. The plays look exactly like Hornets Chris Paul from like 2007. Sometimes for even a quarter, he's
Yeah.
like looking like the same exact guy. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's kind of like, I think as much as we say that Ja Morant, just for example, has to, uh, develop a jump shot because that's, like that's the one thing that separates him from being
Yep.
this unbelievably unstoppable force. It's
Yep.
also the thing that could help prolong his career because you see the way that guy jumps at the rim and like the
Oh my
viciousness with which he
gosh.
attacks. I've never seen anything like him ever,
No.
and he's absolutely phenomenal. But all that in high vertical,
Yep.
you go at everybody in my way and just destroy the basket. Eventually, there's going to be wear and tear there, and
Exactly.
the more he can sort of balance that out with an outside game, the more he can kind of add some years back on the end of his career.
Yeah, and people will say, Iverson was able to attack the basket and pull out a few video clips of Iverson dunking. Yes, of course he did, but again, the attrition kicked in, and you didn't see Iverson dunking. Iguodala Iverson, or even after he won the MVP that year, I don't think he was hitting the rim. So that's exactly right.
For sure.
Well, speaking of the Grizz play the Jazz on Saturday. What about that? We'll jump over
That's
to Friday.
the Jazz are weird. They're very weird to me right now. I like the way that they're playing. They're getting very inventive with like what they have, and they're kind of embracing this like island of misfit toys that they're doing. Um, Obviously, the Grizz should blitz them because just no one can stop John Morant. Like
No.
he's been absolutely like I wrote this in like a thing I wrote this summer, and I was saying like the best game I covered all year long last season was when the Grizzlies were in town, and the way that guy just rises above every other entity at the rim. It's like you're watching a holier than basketball force. Like something is carrying him above the basket, and he's able to just like maneuver through the air and change his hands and change directions. And you're just like what the really like what
Yeah.
is going on here? Is this the anointed one? That
And that I like John Morant too, and sometimes I think about it like, is he training like he wants to be Michael Jordan? Like that's you don't want to throw that out there, but like for his position, he's got like that special like that next gear, you know.
yeah yeah it's he's been given an incredible gift of almost unrivaled athleticism.
Once in 20-year kind of talent. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy. The Sixers play the Raptors twice. So in their second game on Friday, what do you think about that one?
This is going to be an interesting test for the Sixers because the Raptors have kind of been like obviously they beat them, so they're not the kryptonite per se, but that's like a very stark contrast to what the Sixers are from like a physical profile of a team.
Yep.
Um, I'm gonna say they lose that game. I think they win the one tomorrow and they lose the one on Friday.
They're a tough matchup. It's like if you go back and people who are not really baseball fans, they'll look at the last series and say that the Phillies beat them 4-1, and they just handily got rid of those guys. The Raptors game is like that Padres series. You're hanging on the edge of your seat
Yeah,
because they're just a tough matchup for us every time. I mean, and there's like real pain when thought so that 80-time bouncer that Kawhi hit over the back
that's
of
right.
the.
I'll say I remember that game so well, and I was in my senior year college apartment, and I remember that last time out of that game after Jimmy makes the layup in transition. And I'm just thinking to myself, I don't know how it's going to happen. I just know that Kawhi Leonard is about to put his stamp on the series because if you recall, he not only was he a machine in that series,
Oh
he
my
was a
god!
machine that entire run. That was
Oh
maybe
my
one of
gosh!
the single most incredible individual playoff runs by a player I've ever seen in basketball. He was an unstoppable automatic machine, and he he gets that gratuitous, to say the least, bounce, and you're like, I can't say anything. I got to
No,
tip my cap to the guy. He's an unbelievable player.
it hurt. It hurt, but I was like, that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, you're like it sucks that this is the team that is part of it, whether you're a fan of the team or you cover the team or what have you. But it's also like you're proud and honored to have
Yes,
been there to witness it, and
yes.
you can tell your kids and your family and your friends yeah, this is the guy that I got to
Send us
watch
home.
for 7 games. Like he was it was as Kobe
Yes.
reincarnated as I've ever seen.
I mean, that's who he was through that one. Now he started right after that. He started getting way too much respect on the national television shows, and people started saying crazy things like that. But for that 1 year, I've never seen somebody in since the real chosen one, Mister Jordan, carry his team on both sides of the court like that through a playoff run, kind of single handedly.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and if you remember, like Jimmy tried to defend him in the series, he had no chance. There was no way. Ben Simmons was the only one that could really like hold him at all,
yes,
and he was still getting his. But I mean, we're talking like it was 40 points on 15 to 23 shooting.
right.
Like, every time the Sixers came down and didn't get a bucket out of
Yes.
their possession after he missed his own shot, you felt like it was a wasted possession because you didn't take advantage of the fact that he didn't make a shot.
And you were talking about Harden earlier with the mid range. I mean, Kawhi Leonard's mid range game during that postseason one was
Oh,
just
oh,
filthy.
unstoppable, unstoppable. It was.
And you had to tip your cap to him. I think they would have lost the finals though if Kevin Durant didn't have the Achilles. But you can't say injuries are always part of championships. So
Yeah, that team. Everyone says that team was like the best chance, and I guess if you want to think about just arsenal of talent in the starting five, you could say that they still don't have any depth. Like that
no,
team, they were playing Boban the third most minutes on their bench, which was unthinkable. And I think either that game goes to overtime, they probably lose and run out of gas there, and if they don't do that, then they probably lose to Milwaukee.
yep.
But the moment they lost that series was when they didn't win Game 4 because they would have been up 3-1 and going back to Toronto, and they would have won in 6 in Philly, but they lose Game 4.
Somebody missed a jumper at the top. Was that
So Kawhi actually, that no one there was like a 7-minute stretch where the Sixers didn't make a shot. It was like they were trying to hold the Raptors off, and then out of nowhere, Kawhi comes up and knocks down this huge three at the top of the key to give the Raptors a 4-point lead with over a minute to play, and that was essentially the game. And you just felt like that was the opportunity that they let slip away that game, because if they go up 3-1, it's probably over in 6.
well, yeah.
Now that I've depressed everybody,
Everybody just went there with me for a second on that deep thought,
yeah,
the moment of silence for that Sixers team.
that's right.
So Russell Westbrook shooting about 29% this year. I mean, surefire Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players I've had the opportunity to see. I feel like at moments of watching some of the things he's done, like you said earlier, about I feel honored to have been able to watch him. But at this point in his career, that's not how I feel when I watch him. Do you think he's going to end up getting the John Wall treatment, get sent home and get paid to go home, or are they going to be able to trade him? Or are they going to ride with him all year? What are we doing here, man?
So I think they're going to trade him because I just think that you can't waste another LeBron year. And yeah, and that's another person. Like I'm not a. I will tell you, I've never been a big Russell Westbrook guy because I've seen him single-handedly lose series for his team. Like he's shot the Thunder. He's made terrible decision after terrible decision in huge playoff moments to lose series for his team. And I mean, you could look at the fact that he basically drove Durant out of Oklahoma City with the way that they were up 3-1 and lost that series. Whether you thought it was a move of fortitude or not by Durant, he has had his weak moments. But as a competitive athlete and as a guy who I think as a player means well in his intent, you feel bad for the person.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's not easy to, for him to look out into the distance and think like 5 years ago I was the man,
Yep.
and what happened to me, and
Father Time. He came.
yeah, and and then to watch the way that he has to play now and the way that he's disrespected on the court, and rightfully so, because teams are going to play to his weaknesses, and the way that his teammates view him, you're like, this is kind of like sad, you know? And I'm sure for him, like to lose your love for the game, it can't be easy. And I say that as somebody who, I feel like if I lost my love for basketball, what would my identity be as a person? Because that's my job,
Yep.
And so for him as a player, what are you doing if you lose that love for basketball? And so even if you don't like Westbrook the player, you think
Yep.
this or that, as a human, you do have empathy for the fact that like this is hard to watch, and I'm sure for
It
him
is.
it's emotionally brutal.
I mean, it's another allegory in the story of these guards, these explosive guards. Like, we love to see it. It's great. It's exciting. Russell Westbrook skying over Steven Adams to get rebounds, offensive rebounds, triple doubles, 15, 15, 15, 25, 15, 15. It's great. But at a certain point, you've got to accentuate your game for the younger people
Now,
coming.
to be fair, though, on the other hand, it would be nice if he made an effort to like set off ball screens for just teammates or cut off the ball, just to show like, hey, I recognize that I am not the guy that I once was, but I want to fit in and help this team be its best version. And I don't see that with the Lakers. He had, as much as it's tough you feel bad for the human. He's also a man who has to reconcile the fact that I'm not the guy I once was. Am I going to be mature about it and adapt to the version of myself that can help a team win, or am I going to try to relive the best years of my life like I'm a guy at a bar in high school, or I'm a guy living out his high school days at a bar?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys like that. Just go to your local bar, listeners, just go there. You'll be able to spot them. Just go people watch.
I don't want to hear about your high school quarterback days. Like that was 30 years ago. Like, are you going to be that guy? Or are you going to be the
Yes.
good comeback story about the guy who rebounded and
reinvented himself.
Reinvented to become the new best version of himself.
That's right. I mean, honestly, I mean, to your point, I mean, you feel for the person, but as analyzing the game, I feel like, honestly, I think that they're going to have to pay him to send him home. I don't think I just don't. I don't know what anybody's going to give up for him. If they can get it, I don't want to see another wasted LeBron year. But Austin, do you have any? I don't betray any confidential information, but do you have any ideas of what a move would look like?
So I think the more that they see themselves shoot 20% from three, I think more the Pacers package of Hield and Turner for picks and whatever makes sense. But I will say this: the entire
you get Hield, Turner, and picks for
no,
Russ.
No, I'm saying like Russ plus their first round picks to Indiana for Turner and Hield, or
okay,
or
okay.
like Russ picks to Charlotte for Gordon Hayward,
Okay.
and stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
I will say this: the more that this goes on, the longer this goes on, and the longer that the Lakers look horrendous, the less leverage the Lakers have in these trades, because teams are going to say, "We'll take your 2 picks. We'll take this guy and that guy in addition to let's see how bad you want to win and want to salvage this season."
You have to, though, because not only is Russ not looking good, AD's not looking good. I feel like
I had enough of Anthony Davis. People were like, "This guy is the one top 5 player." I'm like, if this dude can get on a court and maybe not settle for step back jumpers and threes, like as much as people get mad at Joel for not playing under the rim, at least he can shoot the ball. He can shoot the ball really well from the mid range.
Yes.
Davis, what has he been since the bubble? Right? And he's been injured. I get it, but like even when he does play, he doesn't look like anything close to what he was.
He's a top 25 player. I think I would give him 25, but people were talking 5. People were talking 3 a couple years ago.
Right. And that's just like, come on, and the Pelicans love all this. He wanted out of New Orleans and, he forced his way out, and they milked the Lakers for everything that they had. And now the Pelicans look really good. They look like they're going to. And, people say like, was the trade worth it? And I get it. Like, if you don't make the series of decisions you made after Davis trade and you trade away that core for Westbrook, then you're not having a conversation. But genuinely speaking, I don't know that if you look at New Orleans, if you can really say that they lost the trade. I mean, they got Brandon Ingram, they lost Lonzo Ball, but then they got CJ McCollum, and they have they have these picks from the Lakers. Now the Lakers could flame out so quickly. And then suddenly the Pelicans they have Zion, they have CJ, they have Herb Jones, they have Brandon Ingram, and then they got a top 5 pick too, because the Lakers suck this year. So they might be looking at the same like, we got him, we won that trade, and I don't blame them.
If you get, like a generational point guard, you throw into that mix, you get Zion, you give Zion, you play patient with Zion, let him come back, get in the shape that he needs to be. You're talking perennial
Oh yeah.
contender there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Because Brandon Ingram looks like baby Kevin Durant. This, if you guys haven't watched Brandon Ingram, I know people don't flip the channel to see Pelicans, but do it. The guy gets buckets.
Yeah, he's a mid-range savant. Like that dude, that dude is turned into a really nice ball handler, a really good playmaker now. And he just lives in the mid-range. I mean, that dude is he's kind of like an homage. Like, there are certain players that are like homage to the old school game of like, I'm gonna kill you in the mid-range, and DeRozan's one of them. Butler to sometimes is one of them.
Yes.
Devin Booker's one.
Mhm.
Bi is one.
Yep.
Brandon Ingram is a mid-range assassin, and he has
Yes.
the high release. He is lanky. He can get it over anybody, and so he really is like sort of becoming that Kevin Durant. But Kevin Durant's much more reliant on the 3-point shot.
Yes.
Ingram is not, and I don't know why he isn't, because he had a really good 3-point shooting year his first year in New Orleans. So we'll see, but that team looks like it's going to be really good for a number of years, and they still have more on the way with this Lakers pick coming.
And more on the way, as Zion Williamson comes along. I mean, that dude is incredible. All they got to do is get him on a a great conditioning plan, get him from that 280, 300 number, get him in the 260s. He could be MVP-ish. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to get crazy here, but Zion is that good.
Well, yeah, I mean, Brian Windhorst said it best. He might be the greatest rim force since Shaq. And I don't think it's that great. And the way that he just so fluidly moves around the basket, I think we lump Shaq in with like the traditional big man, which is kind of like this big brute force.
Yep.
Shaq was nimble on his feet.
Yes, he was.
At his best, and he had this fluidity where he could spin around and operate in transition. Zion has that similar like agility where he can just kind of change direction, spin around guys, and absolutely tomahawk you. And I do see the comparisons to Shaq for sure.
So I told the listeners, if you've listened all the way from the beginning, appreciate it, that we would work in the Phillies a little bit, of course, because two Philly guys, getting to talk sports during this beautiful red October. So Austin, who are you enjoying rooting for most, on like individual player, during this Phillies run?
So I thought about this for a while. This was a question that lingered in my head for a while because it's a great question. I think the obvious answer is Bryce. And I was saying this to my dad the other day. Like, baseball is a sport where if you hit 3 out of every 10, you're a good player.
Mm-hmm.
Bryce Harper is so uniquely gifted that you don't like every high leverage big at bat in the game. You don't know how he's going to do it. You don't know, what it's going to involve. You just know he's going to get the big hit. And in that game on Sunday, I didn't know how he was going to do it. I didn't know, whether it be a double or whatever, or a homer. I just knew that if he got the bat on the ball, that he was so locked in, that ball is going to go. And it was going to be something amazing. And I remember off the bat, I'm getting chills thinking about it.
Yeah.
He gets that high fastball away, and as soon as he makes contact, my initial thought is, "Oh, that's gone," because he got it in the way he squared it up. It was like such a perfect Bryce opposite field swing, and he's staring at it, and
Yes.
it's gone when he stares at it, because that guy knows his own strength.
Yes.
It was just such an iconic, all-time great, not just Phillies moment, but a great baseball moment. And for a sport that is, supposedly falling behind basketball and soccer and football, that was a great marketing moment for baseball. Just the one of the biggest faces of the game playing for this team that has seemingly defied all odds, comes in the biggest moment of the game and a chance to send his team to the promised land, and he builds this opposite field 2-run bomb. I mean, it was such a perfect moment for baseball in general. So Bryce is the obvious one. Another guy that's been great I think underrated so is Stott. Bryson Stott.
Yeah.
He had that at bat against Strider again in the NLDS. That at bat was so much like the Victorino at bat or the Brett Myers at bat against CC Sabathia in
Worked him.
2008.
Yeah.
NLDS, yeah, he walks him, and then Victorino hits a grand slam. So it was like he's had as a rookie, he's in the biggest games of his life, uncharted territory, not just for him but for so many of his teammates. To no one that he could really rely on for advice necessarily. Comes up there and he's working these counts against these aggressive pitchers and in these huge moments, and he's getting down the count, and then he's staying patient and he's lining these doubles for these huge massive hits to give the Phillies the lead, to put pressure on the defense, on the pitching staff, and he's setting up his teammates for bigger moments too. And so I think Bryson Stott's been awesome in these playoffs. Doesn't get on base every time, but there's a big moment in a game, and he has been up to the task a lot of the time in these playoffs.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, that's what's so exciting about this run. Because it just feels like somehow they're going to get it. They're going to make it happen because there's so many guys who are just coming up with plays. You got Gene Segura, you got Rhys Hoskins coming up with plays. I mean, the only guy who's not making plays right now, who I am sure is going to make plays, I've continued to tell people to just wait on it, is Nick Castellanos.
I knew you were going to say it.
if Nick Castellanos, I mean, we're doing all of this and kind of carrying Nick Castellanos to the Super Bowl, I mean, to the World Series, but it's all good, Nick. You're going to come through, man.
Well, the thing is this, like, he hasn't lived up to the power numbers, but he's been a pretty good doubles hitter. Just that he's always, he has basically no idea at the plate what he's doing. He's down in a 1-2 count all the time. But when he's making solid contact, he's roping doubles into the left corner, in the gap. I mean, he had the big double the other night, I think, that gave the Phillies the lead. Maybe that was Stott. I don't remember who, but it was, or tied the game. I think it was
tied the game. I think it was Castellanos that tied it. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he hasn't been what he's advertised to be, but he's been, steadily okay. I think in the postseason.
But he's not a superstar, but Nick Castellanos is a star, and he hasn't been near that yet. So I feel like the regression to the mean, it has to come. Yeah. It just statistically, it's gonna happen, y'all.
I'll say this. He is far too good looking and handsome to be bad at baseball. Like he's a very good looking.
He is a good looking man,
and that has equity. I don't know what equity that does. I guess because when you see an outfielder and you're like, you're like, that's a good looking guy.
Yeah,
that guy's usually a really good baseball player too. if that's his sport.
And he always. Until this year, he really has always been a good baseball player. Like probably was the best player on his high school team, his college
probably
team.
Detracts from all my credibility, but I feel like it's the truth. I feel like it's the journalistic truth to say that Nick Castellanos is a good looking dude, and you typically, if you have a good looking baseball player, they're usually not that bad. So
I mean, Bryce Harper, it's working for Bryce Harper. So
right, like ask yourself, when have you ever seen an ugly baseball player that was bad at baseball? Or that was, like
I guess Cal Ripken's a good-looking guy too. So I guess Cal Ripken. I was gonna say Cal Ripken, but
like everyone loved Chase Utley.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Chase Utley was really good at baseball.
My mom liked Victorino, so
I think that's a good example. Like I wouldn't think of him as necessarily good. What does this podcast become?
Honorable mention. We're mentioning there.
That's right. I guess this is what we're doing now.
Austin, well, thank you so much for coming on again, man. Great to talk some basketball and then talk some baseball and talk about how good looking, Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins. We didn't get there yet, but all good looking. J-Roll, shout out to J-Roll.
That's right. That's right.
Tell the people what you're working on, plug whatever, so we can follow along.
Yeah. So obviously I cover the Sixers for the Painted Lines. I'm a writer, podcaster as well. A podcast called The Feed to Embiid. Me and a variety of guests every once in a while talking about the state of the team. Also cover the NBA for USA Today. Another thing I wanted to bring up, which I'm sure you can get, I'm sure that you would agree with, Brittany Griner. Like let's can we as a society all just do the right thing and help, let's find a way to get her home. This is ridiculous. What's happening to her. Like we can admit that yes, she broke a law in Russia.
Yes.
But that's also what what's happening is atrocious, and it's
It is.
inexcusable, and it's an abomination. And there's no world where she should be doing 9 years in prison in Russia over weed.
While people, I mean, it just, I don't want to get into both sides about all this, what is this other person doing? But
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can all agree that, having a little weed on you, you shouldn't have to, sit in the slammer and think about that for a decade.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, it's preposterous. Let's get her home. Let's find a way to get her home here. It's much easier for me to just say that from my chair in Philadelphia, but in all seriousness, it's the human thing to do. Let's get her home and do the right thing here.
Well, shout out to Austin. Honorable mention for him dropping that. He's the first person to say that on here. Appreciate that. You can follow me, my personal account. If you're one of those people, again, I always say this, if you're one of those people that say stick to sports, just all I want to hear is the sports, the stats, all that, don't come to my personal page, which is POLITIDOP. You'll be very disappointed. But if you do just want to stick to the sports, go to Mention Pod on Twitter and Honorable Mention _podcast over on Insta. I'll be posting all this up. And thank you so much, Austin.
No problem, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure.